here's your grade. What the hell is that about? Fortunately, having people like Marianne and others in my class, it wasn't until 10 years ago that I was forced by my students to come up with a rubric. A rubric for writing papers in my class. Holy crap, you mean you were supposed to tell students what they should be doing to get a good grade? This is after your time, Marianne, I'm sorry. Yeah, what a concept. And of course, it took students to come to me to say, have you ever, in a very polite, gentle way, have you ever thought about developing a rubric for this class? Like, this is dumb, and this is less dumb, and this is better, and this is really good, and this is what it would look like if you taught this history of higher ed class again? Right? What a concept. And maybe the only way we can get at the deep learning outcomes that the world is expecting of us is through authentic measures of student performance, and a objective test ain't going to reveal that. A single measure can't do it. So anyway, let's move on. Oh, there it is, deep integrative learning. Why is that up there? Yeah.
Have you found anything with regard to, as far as the exchange maybe going on in the classroom between written composition versus oral communication and presentation? Is that measured anywhere, that maybe students are being required to do a lot more short presentations or kind of just outline modes of writing, or PowerPoint style, but not as much in the full?
Well, you got a thesis. I don't have an answer to your question the way I don't have an answer to your question, but you have an operating assumption in your head that one is better than the other, or?
No, I'm wondering if you've seen that maybe sometimes they're put out there as equal, written communication and oral communication are equal, but maybe they're not equal. Maybe it says you've been presenting that written should be emphasized more so than the oral.
Well, you're right, I am emphasizing that more. Probably for two reasons, but the most important is I don't have any data on oral. But I think both are important. And you heard that, from Bob King this morning, and employers say it all the time. You've got to be able to express yourself clearly, orally, and so on. So both are important, but I think I'm just hazarding a guess. I think our standards aren't quite the same, or the canons of expression aren't as well known for oral presentation as, you could do rubrics on that as well, but what one person hears as an effective argument may be slightly different than another. So bottom line is I don't know for sure. I don't know. I do know that if you do one to the exclusion of the other, students aren't going to benefit. Other people will argue that good writing is fundamentally good thinking. And this goes back to some of you who are arguing about the clarity of expressing and examining complex issues. Some people, now I'm just blowing smoke at you. I don't know this for sure, but I think once you put something in writing and you have a chance to look at it, I suppose we could do this if we recorded ourselves too. And we're critical in listening to, which of course is something I never do because I can't handle the truth. But it's easier to look at your own writing and get others to look at it than, I think it's easier, it's in some ways more efficient than asking them to. Yeah?
When you went to the rubric, what happened?
Well, first of all, students, I think, were more accepting of what they thought I was doing, first of all, right? Second, it was easier for me to grade the papers. Now, this has a downside, right? Because if you aren't allowing for kind of more creative ways of thinking about a topic, if that rubric is so specific that there's no room, if there's no additional cell, there aren't additional rows in terms of what you're looking for, you can shortchange students and shortchange the field and not get new, innovative ways of thinking and knowing. But it became much more efficient. I've talked with faculty members who've gone through accreditation reviews. It was one institution on the West Coast in WASC where WASC, this is the regional accreditor, which demanded, didn't demand rubrics, but it was looking for evidence of outcome measures. And there was the provost there who said, you got to come up with something. The easiest thing for every unit to do is to come up with rubrics to identify what we want to have happen here in this course, in this major, in the... Anyway, this will make a long story short. Not all faculty groups see this as being beneficial. You don't know anybody like that, but let's just imagine that that's so. And at this institution, the provost gave them 3 years to get this work done. And there were a couple of units that didn't. There are 2 points to this. One is, talking with faculty that did, you know, what I just told you was what they told me. It's made my work more efficient. Students are better at it because they now are being cued at what they're supposed to, this is best practice. Before, it's like they had to divine it, right? And it's only at the end of the semester that we try to explain to them what I tried to explain what it was I was looking for. Why didn't I explain that at the beginning? Well, because I didn't know. But don't tell them that. So this provost expected everybody to come up with something, and rubrics were the coin of the realm. The anthropology department didn't, as only anthropology departments can do, I guess. And they had a senior faculty member retire, and so the department chair came in and asked the provost for permission to recruit. And the provost said, no, I don't have rubrics from your department. Everybody on the campus knew that within 37 seconds. Right? I mean, it was unfortunate she didn't make it public, but it was made public, and the rest of the units, man, they came up with rubrics. You know? I mean, that seems heavy-handed, but it wasn't done overnight. You got 3 years to do this. You know, we're pushing, prodding, trying to provide. All right, move on. Where are we? Deep integrative learning, move on. Oh, this is just more about writing, for goodness sake. It's all is to say that the data are real. These are questions, by the way, that we devised in collaboration with some national writing groups. Geez, there's more? Come on, get out of here. All right. Okay, so what makes for a high-impact practice? What would we look for? Right? Lily, what would we look for? What would be evidence to know that the practice is likely to be high impact? So, I shouldn't have shown that. People are reading ahead now. Why is research with a faculty member a high impact practice? What makes research with a faculty member a high impact practice? Treating students as a peer. You can do it. You can be just like me. I mean, not you be like me, but I mean, what else?
Extends the learning outside the classroom.
Takes the learning beyond the classroom, puts it in a different, not only in a different situation, but requires time beyond.
Personalizes the experience.
So the student has some ownership over this. I guess I want to get at what this is, too. Did you have something? Feedback? Yeah, well, I like that. You're borrowing the mantra. That's good, that's good.
It's the nature of inquiry. It's new knowledge. It's the new discovery of information.
All right. Yeah. No. I want to. I'm trying to connect it to something that I'm trying to say. So, what is the nature of the process that brings students to that kind of realization? What does it look like? I'm talking about just concrete steps in the research process. It looks like what? That's one approach, scientific method. I know, we're not communicating. Yeah. Well, the mentoring, but these are part of the psychosocial stuff. What you know, what I know, what the data now show is that if you just ask a student to help you collect data, not so much. So when you said scientific method, I translated that into saying, what is the problem? What are we trying to investigate, right? What's known about this problem? How have people studied it before? What conclusions have they drawn? What kinds of questions could we ask that would extend what the field knows about this. How would we go about collecting that stuff? Help me design the tools to do this. Help me analyze the data. Help me write it up. You take part in presenting it. And you're getting feedback along the way, right? It's the very same process we've been talking about. High structure at the front end. That's the point about this. It's not just about collecting the data. That's the last point here. And you know, at least the way my mind is working, you can generalize that same process to almost any kind of so-called high-impact activity. Service learning. It's got to have structure on the front end. What are we trying to accomplish here? It's going to basketball practice, and we know what we're going to work on today. And we know what we're going to ask people to do here because we've had some success in the past and we're studying it and so forth and so on. So, you know, from our data anyway, you know, diving into the literature, you know, all the things you've said to make this personally more meaningful. One of the things is, of course, I've either tapped you to do this, which makes me pretty special. There are some campuses, you know, that require an inquiry experience with a faculty or staff member. They tend to be smaller places, but guess what? Well, Miami University over in Oxford, not so far from here, is basing its curriculum on an inquiry orientation, right? In fact, when I was speaking this morning, I don't know if you ever caught this, but I was talking about designing a first-year seminar that is either writing or inquiry intensive, right? To personalize the learning and to getting greater student investment. And we have in our mind's eye, I think, a warped, flat-out wrong interpretation of where this work happens. Now, I've spent 34 happy years at a research university, treated very well there, blah, blah, blah. But it is so that students at research universities, on average, don't get any more attention in terms of doing research than they do at other kinds of institutions. This is the number of hours that faculty themselves spend on a weekly basis and the number of hours they spend with undergraduates. So you can see the big difference here in terms of types of institutions, in terms of what faculty do, but there are no practical differences in terms of students and student involvement in faculty research. That means nothing to you, but I haven't had the data slide, so I thought I'd show it. Yep.
So you had mentioned earlier that it's really important for these high-impact experiences to happen in that first year for persistence.
Did you hear that? Really important to try to get students involved in a high-impact activity in the first year? Yes?
What is the recommendation to have to try to get first-year students involved in research with faculty members? Because that seems to be something that won't really take place until they're within their major or discipline.
Yeah, that's a good point. Not all of these things are probably as, I want to say relevant, that's not quite the right word, but this is a good point. There are some undergraduates who are ready to jump in, but most aren't. So you want to put them in activities where they, in fact, are more likely to benefit in terms of the goal realization of the thing. So this is why I've emphasized service learning, first-year seminar, diversity experiences, learning communities. These are things that are easier to conduct, to have take place in the first year. I think research with a faculty member, probably study abroad. You know, we aren't ready. Most employers don't want us, I'm talking now here about traditional age students. You know, we don't want to throw a bunch of students into internships in the first year because what have they got to integrate and apply? You know, I mean, this is we're starting to get just our arms around what it takes to understand the larger world and so on and so forth. Yeah, so that's a very good point. Thank you for asking. I don't know what that slide is supposed to show, so let's move on. This is a campus culture. This may not look like a campus culture indicator, but it is. It is essentially showing that the more important a faculty member thinks it is for a student at his or her university to do research, the more likely it is that a student at that university will do it. Now, you may say, you just put a bunch of words together and I don't get it. When you ask faculty, how important is it that a student at your institution do this? What we're saying is the more faculty who think it's important, the more likely a student will do it. I say it's a campus culture issue, but by the way, these are not faculty themselves who are necessarily doing research with a student. It is the collective kind of corporate position on what matters to a high-quality undergraduate experience. So some of this is, not some of it, I've already said it, it's a campus culture issue. I can't tell you how to get from here to there except to point out to faculty members the benefits of it, even if they themselves are not doing research.
Is that an item on the FESI?
It is. It's exactly right, the Faculty Survey of Student Engagement. So we've put together FESI and NESI data to get a display like this. See, there are many questions that we can ask faculty that correspond to or are somehow related to the student experience. You just ask faculty members about that. All right, finally, how many of you, I can't help, this is why I wasn't a very good classroom teacher, because I did this in the class all the time. How many of you require your campus, all of your majors require a student to do some form of a culminating experience? Well, that's pretty good. I mean, it's better than a stick in the eye, but a lot of places, some of you probably don't know or care what I'm talking about here. But this is kind of the wrapping up, the so-called point in time where we ask students to show us what they can do in some way. It could be a comprehensive exam, it might be this major project, it might be my senior paper, you know, Macbeth. Yeah, that was the play. Sometimes it is a course. How many of you use a course for this work to be demonstrated? Yeah. Well, that's good. So here's my crabby statement about this. To those of you who don't, what in the world is the educational rationale for not requiring a senior culminating experience? Employers want it. Students need it. They will, in some instances, it's really the only place that they will be forced to bring some things, if not everything, together and to show what they can do. I just think it's awful. I know what the reasons are. You know, some programs say, well, we couldn't possibly do it. You know, we graduate 300 majors a year. It's impossible. We only have a faculty of 12 or whatever it is, you know, and so forth and so on. And then you point them to places with similar demographics. Say, well, how do they do it over there? Cal State Monterey Bay. How does that work? UT El Paso. How can they get... well, I've made my crabby point here. Then the point I want to come back to what I said earlier today, and that is we cannot wait until the 8th semester at a 4-year school or the 4th academic term for the associate degree for people to get practice at this. It's kind of like, it's like anything else. It's the reflection integration. They need to have opportunities earlier to do this, but this is the coup de grace, so to speak, right? The capstone experience. And we know some of these things, like all the other high impact, you know, they got to be done well. But you know, the things that, at least by student report, you know, putting students in the real world setting as part of this capstone tends to be more powerful across the board, at least by their own reports. Now this, someone said this earlier, when we were talking about doing research with a faculty member. That says meeting with a faculty member. It could be a staff member. It could be an internship. supervisor, but the point here is that this is not just turn people loose for 8 weeks and pretend that they're writing a long paper and they know how to do it. And they're going to be modifying their behavior along the way. This, as someone just asked, this is FESI data, and sometimes this, I use this when I'm on a campus to surprise faculty. This is the question, how important is it? Well, it's not how, but how, it's the question, it's important or very important. That's what these summed columns represent, that a student do this before they graduate. On many campuses, on most campuses, it is not a requirement across all programs that there be a culminating experience. And yet, most of the faculty on those campuses say it's important. So we have, in some of those instances, a failure of academic leadership to bring our colleagues to the table around something that can be a very powerful learning experience. Now I want to go back to the question about what has this got to do with a sophomore or a junior or a first-year student. There are institutions that bring seniors, about to graduate students, who are doing their capstone and personally testify. Now I'm overstating what I mean by that, but describe the nature of what they're doing. Whether it's research, research with a faculty member could be this, their own research, field-based project. And when you get those people in the room, students, your students, oh, they get jazzed about what they're doing. I mean, you don't have to drag them in and get them. They're kind of like you talking about something that you're really interested in and committed to and have spent a lot of time doing and are proud of. And that has a very different feel to students who have no clue as to what this work is or will be like. I'm always surprised with our data. Students will, first-year students, the percentage who say they plan to do a culminating experience is, like 12% say they'll plan to do it. They don't even know their institution requires it. So there's some issues here in terms of what enrollment admissions people drum into folks and being clear about this. Anyway, but my point is a bigger one than that. And that is, there are ways to use peers throughout the academic program that can, I'll use the word inspire, and it's overstated a bit here, but when you bring them into a first-year seminar, right? Even a junior who's now thinking about work, and when you bring the librarian into the first-year seminar, and he or she says, here are the resources that will be available to you when you do your senior project. These students don't have a clue as to what a senior project is, but we're telling them, when you get to this point, meaning about to graduate, everybody in this room, is able and will be willing and will be prepared to help you do this. You're now sending a very different kind of message to students than, we hope you make it here. It isn't about hope any longer, right? It's about your dissertation, Marianne. When Marianne came up to me and she said, I want to go to work full time. She hasn't finished her dissertation. We know that's a crazy thing to do. Nobody leaves my program without finishing their dissertation. And I told Marianne, you'll do it. You go get that job, but you're going to finish your dissertation. That's a very different message, right, than holding a student at bay, we're not sure you're going to make it here.
I was just going to make an observation where you mentioned the admissions office. With the admissions office, we admit a lot of students that end up choosing another institution. Now, I mean, students who would make it, who would finish if they just chose us in the first place. And so a lot of these things, like a research program, is really a way to also be more attractive to maybe in-state students who are flocking to out-of-state schools or out-of-state. So
You have the gall to tell me that you can market a high-impact activity to attract students to your university when you know they will benefit enormously from it? Huh? Is that what you're saying? Really? I mean, of course we should, with the proviso that, A, we got to be sure that what we're delivering is of high quality. However we figure out what a really good service learning course looks like and when, whatever that might be. And B, we got enough of them so we can accommodate every student who either wants one or who we're going to ask to do one for whatever reason. These are not out of the realm of possibility. You know, both things are quite plausible. They're doable. We can do it. Yes.
In terms of the culminating experience, do many schools make it an actual graduation requirement?
Yes, you bet.
So you have to pass the class, or you have to pass this?
Oh, I see. This is a question about culminating experience. Do you have to do one to grad? Well, yes. My son. My son didn't do college, you know, in the 4 years. He took his time, waddled around here and did this. And he ended up doing his experience. I'm just giving you an example. He could not get his degree from Luther College without finishing his culminating experience. In his case, it was an AmeriCorps project. Not only did he have to turn a paper in, but he had to orally present it, which made a problem because he was no longer on the campus. So they let him videotape his presentation and so forth and so on. So, yeah, the answer is yes. Now, one of the questions, well, this isn't what you asked, but there are some institutions now that are struggling. They've clearly identified the learning outcomes that they expect and promise to their students, and are now trying to come up with measures to demonstrate that students have achieved those outcomes, right? I'm thinking of Westminster College in Salt Lake City, Utah, is now on the cusp of saying, here are the outcomes, here are the measures we're using, and now the last question is, will we not grant your diploma unless you achieve at these desired levels across the outcomes? Ouch! You know, but that's a different question than the one you asked. But you bet, yeah, a lot of institutions, well, those of you who raised your hand, I mean, I